It's a pleasure to have you all here today. And I am extremely excited to speak to our panelists. Quick introduction for myself first. My name is Jay. I am head of content at Indiverse Company. I will be moderating our discussion with our dynamic panelists today. So, may I please first request the panelists to introduce themselves? I'll follow the order on my screen. We have Panchali.
I'm Panchali, an organizational psychologist. For over 2 decades, I've partnered with corporates and I have coached thousands of professionals. On the personal side, I have 4 young nephews and 1 cousin who are neurodivergent. I shifted gears and joined hands with Gitanjali 3 years back to make life more purposeful, and together we started Ortwait. So at Ortwait, we focus on sustainable employment for the neurodivergent, and we offer 2 B2B solutions broadly. Number one, end-to-end DEI consulting. So we partner with enterprises to facilitate awareness and sensitization, drive inclusive hiring. And as coaching consultants, we coach the neurodivergent employees and their teams and their managers. The second solution that we offer service is data annotation, training, and consulting. So we train the neurodivergent in data annotation to create the training data for AI and ML models. And our trained resources deliver client projects working remotely. And I'm proud to say that 70%, more than 70% of Ortwait's team are neurodivergent. And we are the first company to be working at the intersection of neurodivergence and artificial intelligence. Over to you, Jay.
Thank you so much. Already, I can feel my brain crackling with all the questions I'd like to ask you about the work you're doing. But I need to hold myself back first and allow Vivek to please introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vivek. I am a part of Microsoft. I've been with Microsoft for the last 20 years. I have the privilege of also leading Microsoft's disability ERG for people with disabilities across all of Microsoft India. I've been in this role for the last 7 years, and I also have my own experiences with disability. But before I dive into that, just want to thank, and Panchali, thank you for the work that your organization is doing. We need many more entrepreneurs like you who invest in this area, right? There is a big opportunity, and thank you for creating this organization which is focusing on neurodiversity as well.
Thank you. So I think to Vivek's point, we want to embed within our session today the lived experience and use that to guide us. So what I'm actually going to request is, Vivek, if you would be okay to kick things off by sharing a little bit about your experiences, the challenges you faced with disability at work, and also the various support systems that have supported you in your journey.
So, one piece that I want to talk about from a disability standpoint, disability is something that can touch any one of us. Very often, a lot of times, we end up investing in disability only when it starts impacting us. Today, more than 70% of the people with disabilities are not born with disabilities. They acquire them over a lifetime. The other element that touches disability is the fact that a lot of people, when you ask them, what is disability? It is a lot to do with what you can see. When you see a person on a wheelchair, that's a disability. When you see someone who has a walking stick, has a disability. But the reality is, disability is far deep. There are so many invisible disabilities which are often never spoken of. Many organizations, when they look at hiring people with disabilities, the focus predominantly has been on disabilities that are visible. You have locomotor disabilities. You have, and even what I've seen in this entire experience and the journey across the time that when people, even within the disability spaces, there are biases, right? It's not that all disabilities get the same treatment. A lot of times, there are organizations that would want, hey, I want someone with a disability, but if they can, if they're on a wheelchair, but they can work so that their productivity does not go in. But I got the tick box that I have hired someone with a disability. Disability is also a spectrum. Many people look upon disability as an on-off switch, right? That if you have disability, it's either you have it or you don't have it. But the reality is, when you ask anyone, it's a spectrum and it touches different people in different ways. My story is no different. Back in 2007, I remember I was on a trip to US, and I was on this long conversation with a relative who's based out of US. And as we do over a long call, I was trying to shift my mobile from one hand to the other hand. And I realized something was not clear. When you're talking on one side and the other side, I felt, but when you experience something like this for the first time, you feel that maybe there is water in the ear or something, right? And I ignored it. But I could sense that very clearly that, hey, when I'm shifting from one ear to the other ear, something was wrong. I ignored it, but then I started observing it more and more, during the course, and I realized that there's something wrong with my hearing. Uh, I came to India. I got diagnosed. I went to an ENT specialist. They did an MRI scan. They eventually realized that I had acoustic neuroma. Acoustic neuroma, in simple layman words, is a tumor in the brain. And if you have this tumor, it can lead to facial paralysis, complete hearing loss. Your balancing can go for a toss. So the only option that was given to me was, hey, you can do a brain surgery and we can remove the tumor. But brain surgery is not the coolest thing to do, right? So I kept on going to second, third opinion till the times there's someone who told me that, you don't have to go through a surgery. I eventually found someone. I found someone who suggested me something that had just come to India, something called as a gamma knife surgery. A gamma knife surgery is a non-invasive method where there are 206 different laser rays that are pointed to the tumor and they kill the tumor without having to open your brain. It was experimental at that point of time. I went ahead with it. Eventually, we were able to take care of the tumor, but along with the tumor, I got something called as tinnitus. Tinnitus is something where you have this constant ringing in your ear for a very, very long time and hearing loss in one ear. Now, what that does is when you look at it, my family is the one that's, they realize that this is something that has happened. The first advice that came to me is around the fact that let's not talk about it. Let's not claim insurance from your company. Let's not talk about it. Don't talk to your friends about it. And where is this coming from? My family members are well-wishers. They don't intend ill. But what we need to realize, and this is one part that I want everyone to realize, our parents and people who give us advice at times have lived in a different era. At that time, and I followed what they asked me to do. But what I was doing was something called as covering, where I am hiding my disability. And when you hide your disability, it is very, very frustrating because you have a problem, you are unable to hear. There's this constant ringing sensation. I remember I jumped into a swimming pool, which was 30 feet deep. It was a diving pool. I went to the bottom just so that I could shut down that noise for a few seconds. I realized nothing can happen. I tried to figure out what are the solutions. I was told you use white noise, this, that. Eventually, I learned, an Indian fan can possibly be a good masker, right? So I learned how to live with it. But then I realized as I slowly, it was very frustrating because I was suffering through this. I was, navigating through these challenges. I could not speak about it. When people would come to speak to me, and if they spoke to me in the wrong ear, I couldn't hear. So, I would have to act and, try and turn around and have them repeat or, not say what it is. And it was very, very frustrating. And then I realized how challenging it could be. Later on, once you go through it, you start understanding policies, you understand how it impacts people. Luckily, I was a part of an organization that was very, very supportive. And when I spoke up, I got a lot of support as well. And people were mindful around how they could support me, how they could engage with me. And I started being the voice for people with disabilities. If I think of it from a textbook standpoint, would I be called as a person with disability? The answer to that is no in India. Because in India, disability is defined by the RPWD Act of 2016, which says that disability are only those 21 conditions, and these 21 conditions also, when they are very, very severe, is when you are counted as someone with a disability, right? But think of it, disability is something that will touch each one of us. At the age of 40, each one of us is forced to wear a spectacle. If you go to you go for an eye checkup, even if you don't need it, they'll try to sell you one and say that, you will need it. Reality is, what is that? This is again an accessibility aid. Given the sedentary lifestyle that each one of us lives, I don't know how many knee operations will we require by the time we turn 60. Each one of us requires these things. So somewhere down the line, organizations today realize this. Every single organization values this. It is very, very important to talk about your disability. It is okay to ask for accommodations. Most organizations have a reasonable accommodation policy, which is there in place to support. But it is also important that we speak and we seek the support that we require so that we can fully participate and give our best. When we hide things, when we are not open about it at times, it makes it a bit more difficult for people to support us. I remember there was someone I was talking to, and they had a disability. They were hired by an organization. After they was hired, he didn't get the joining letter for 3 months. And he asked them, hey, what happened? They said, we were trying to figure out what all can we do to make the workplace more accessible for him. And his answer was, ask me, right? Ask me, I'll tell you what I need. Don't design for me, don't plan for me, include me in everything that you could do. Over the last several years, I've been working with Microsoft, which is one of the biggest organizations. But I can also tell you this. Every organization is on a journey. We all will make mistakes. Everyone can learn from each other. This is a beautiful forum where I'm looking forward to learning from amazing colleagues across industry and live and learn from their lived experiences, because each one of us is learning, growing, and we are trying to figure out how could we make the world a more inclusive space. Back to you, Jay.
No, thank you so much, Vivek. I think in your story were embedded so many themes that I'd love to touch upon with all our panelists, from our assumptions about disability, invisible versus visible, acquired versus inherent, the pictures that the idea of disability conjures up, which again we are seeing then the political climate reinforces certain ideas. And also, I think with your own personal story, how uh, an organization can come in and support. Also, the suffering of the individual at times, when you describe going into the pool right to the bottom just to turn off the noise of the tinnitus, as well as the larger themes that you're drawing upon. Just really quickly, before I touch on a few points, I'd like to ask our other panelists. I can see Chhavi has joined our session. Chhavi, if you could just do a quick one-line introduction, just so that our other attendees know who you are.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Sorry for joining late. There was
No worries at all.
glitches here and there. My name is Chhavi Anand, and I'm working with Tata AIG General Insurance. From last 2 years, I have total 12 plus years now experience in HR, and yeah, that's all about. And then thank you for inviting me here on this in this forum.
Thank you so much for being here. So, Vivek, to your earlier points, you brought up something that I wanted to touch upon with the other panelists as well, which is the fact that there are lots of conversations about disability unfolding. What my sense is, and what I wanted to sense check with all of you, is that there are certain elements that are missing from this conversation about disability inclusion, that are missing from the discourse around disability inclusion. So, to our other panelists, were there any such elements that perhaps you can think of that are missing from the current conversation that need to be there?
I'll take that. Okay. Yeah. Jay, can I take it, or would you want someone?
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
okay. All right. So I'll try and move in from what Vivek said. So Vivek said reasonable accommodations, and we need to ask and voice our needs and ask for those reasonable accommodations. So this is something which we see missing in the present discourse or conversations around disability inclusion. And this is something we want companies like Microsoft to think of. which is universal design principles. So I'm sure, Vivek, you know what I'm meaning, but just for the audience, when we are speaking of universal design, we are talking of, principles that will go beyond accommodations for specific disabilities. So we are right now, it's in a reactive fashion that we are providing these, accommodations. So we are making the workplace inclusive for the hearing impaired, for the visually impaired, for the neurodivergent, for the person with mobility issues. We need to think of or proactively consider the needs, and for that we need to have a diverse team of designers to think of what could be an inclusive environment for everybody by default. So nobody needs to ask for those accommodations. They are there, inbuilt in the processes. If I need it, I will take it. If I don't need it, I will ignore it. I don't have to, feel worried that your parents and your family was worried that if you disclose, what will happen? Will you be discriminated against? So nobody needs to disclose. The accommodations are there. Avail it if you need it. And if you don't need it, don't avail those, avail the others. So that's where we need to move into. And Orquate, we keep telling our employers who we partner with that let's start thinking in those lines. So that's it from my side.
I think that's a fantastic point, Panchali, because we talk about marginalization in very stark terms, but even asking for an accommodation, sometimes being the only one to ask for an accommodation, is in its of itself a
Correct.
feeling of exclusion or a feeling of marginalization, and it's important for us to address it through design. Were there any other points that you can think of?
Universal design becomes very, very important. I think it's also important for us to ensure that technology is affordable. Today when I look at accessible tech, a lot of times you look at JAWS, you look at a lot of software that is there, which is additional that we need to buy, is very, very expensive. So, there is a lot of scope from an innovation standpoint, is specifically from an India perspective, right? If we look at the India market, the kind of challenges that people with disabilities in India face versus other parts of the world is very, very different. I remember I was attending a conference. It's the Microsoft conference, which we do yearly, our Ability Summit. And we were hosting a session for people with disabilities out there. The room was filled with people with disabilities. But when I close my mind and I think if I did a session exactly like this in India, would everyone have the kind of resources that are available to developed countries? The answer to that is no. So A, we need to ensure that technology is made affordable. B, we need to ensure that we are also looking at disabilities beyond locomotive disability, because there are other dimensions like investing in the neuro segment, investing in invisible disabilities. We know for sure that accessible technology can help level the playing field for people with disabilities across every area of life, right? And while we are a technology company, we lead with our strength. We are very uniquely positioned to accelerate the most powerful opportunities that have been identified to bridge this gap, this disability divide, through the use of accessible tech. So right now at Microsoft, one of the things that we have done is every single product that we design, every single product will be passed only if it is accessible. And we need to take care of all types of disabilities. Again, it's not just about captioning. It is about every single segment, because the need is different for different forms of disability. When we design websites, we need to raise, or we design any product service, we need to raise our commitment, raise the bar for accessibility on every corner of our business. So, be it products, web services, websites, they should be accessible by design for everyone. And we need to also start focusing on areas like mental health. That's the other piece that you touched upon. What is out of the discourse? Mental health. In a country like ours, all this is, many people don't even want to talk about mental health, right? It's a taboo. It doesn't happen. It only happens in the movies, right? But can impact any one of us. So those are segments that I also want to touch upon.
Absolutely. Once again, to Panchali's point earlier as well, this affects all of us. And in fact, I loved your point around just baking accessibility into protocol. So nothing is given the green light without it being accessible. Around the point of affordability, I actually wanted to use this to segue into another question I had for all of you. Look, I feel the ethical and moral case for disability inclusion is more than enough. We need to do it because we owe it to everybody. But if I play devil's advocate for a moment and we talk about the business case, even just for strictly pragmatic, strictly practical, what do you think is the cost that organizations are paying by not focusing on this agenda? And also, what are the potential benefits you all think organizations are missing out on by not taking this agenda seriously? And if you have any statistics or even case studies to illustrate, in fact.
So, I can share a couple of things. One, I think if I have to talk of one metric, right, or one thing that everyone can remember, if organizations do not factor in people with disability, it is like closing their door to every seventh person who's coming in. I don't know which business can afford that. If you don't include people with disabilities, you will miss out on a huge market segment. So it's not a good to do thing. It's a business imperative. It is essential that we focus on people with disabilities. When we design for people with disabilities, we know for sure a lot of those features that we use in our products, and I'm talking from Microsoft perspective, are used many, many more times by people with no disabilities. Captioning was the theme that we spoke of in the morning today. But imagine captioning was meant for people with disabilities. But think of areas where it has helped. You go to an airport, you want to hear news, you can't but if there's captioning, you can get that. If you don't understand the language very, very well, you're trying to pick up the language, you can convert that captioning into a different language, you can understand it. There are so many places where things work. When you talk about statistics, we know there are several studies that have been done that inclusive organizations outperform their peers. Uh, Accessibility is an opportunity, but we have also learned that companies that embrace best practices for employing and supporting people with disabilities outperform their peers. There was a study by Accenture and ADA, the American Association for People with Disabilities. They found that 45 companies identified as standing out for leadership in areas specific to disability employment had, on an average, 28% higher revenue and double the net income. So these are organizations that focused on disability inclusion. Clearly higher revenue, higher net income, and 30% better performance on economic and profit margins. Inclusion also matters a lot to the next generation. If you look at millennials, 75% of our workforce will be millennials. They want to join organizations that are truly, truly inclusive, and diversity and disability inclusion are top on their list. And it's not just this. If you think of even LGBTQI inclusion, the younger generation is far more supportive of inclusion. So if you want to ensure that your future workforce chooses you, you have to broaden the horizon from where you are.
Absolutely. There's profitability, there's performance, there's also your viability as a potential employer of choice. I'm wondering any other points.
I think Vivek has touched upon most of it, but yes, there was also a study by Indian Labour Organization which has also said that organizations which has involved persons with disabilities, their reputation go up by 5.3%, while those who do not have those, that diminishes the reputation by 15.8%. So there are certain statistics like this, even though what Vivek has said in terms of revenue, net profit, it is given. I mean, you talk about any kind of diversity, it exists there, and it's only about trying it out once. The moment, I mean, there was somewhere, I mean, earlier when gender diversity was the only thing that we were talking about, then we have moved to other, kinds of diversities. And now we are talking about persons with disabilities. We are mostly talking about visible, but then there is invisible dimension to it. And then, the more we talk about it, the more people are aware of it, the more benefits I think the companies can get. But there has to
Yeah.
be a start to get into it. That is where the conversation has to start. There are many benefits, I think. Vivek has said, even to our industry, we are into general insurance industry, and the kind of market size that persons with disabilities hold, the kind of insurance policies that we can design for them, that can only come once they are also in as a workforce. Then we will
Right.
be even better understand their experiences, their pain points, their challenges, and maybe try to revamp or create completely new product policies around it, right? So it's all about the mindset. And once we get, I think the organizations start getting realizing the potential of it, the more benefit they can reap out of it.
Yeah, getting the ball rolling almost. And to Vivek, Chhavi, both your points, I think even in a forum like this, sharing our own organizational or industry experiences in this manner to just show performance financially, the kind of benefits, I think, is a good nudge to get that ball rolling for organizations to know, like Vivek said, like it's the smart thing to do, not just the ethical thing to do.
I'd like to pitch in over here, Jay, just giving
Absolutely.
two case studies or case studies. Because so
Okay.
far, all the statistics and surveys are all, global surveys that we've
Yeah. Yeah.
spoken of. So the first case study, Orchid's case study, which I'll mention, is which was published as a white paper by NASCOM and Randstad on inclusion. So this was an edtech employer who wanted to. They had a requirement of, hiring six people, neurodivergents, in three different roles. So it was content writing, business development, and graphic design. So they partnered with us, and we did an end-to-end process, right from designing the inclusive JDs, job descriptions, to circulating that requirement in our trusted networks. And you won't believe it, over 100 applicants reached out to us. And we met 50 candidates one on one, and we shortlisted 14 because the scope was for six. So we shortlisted 14. In parallel, what we did was drove those awareness sensitization and integration workshops in the company to sensitize the workforce there. And then out of the 11 candidates interviewed, 10 of them were hired. So we designed those skill-based assessments and inclusive interviews. We, co-facilitated it with the employer hiring managers. And out of the 10 who were taken in as interns, 8 of them went into an extended internship program with higher stipends, and 5 of them were converted into full-time employees. And the partnership continued as coaches, and in 6 months, 3 of them were being groomed for the next level for leadership positions. And this was across conditions, neurodivergent conditions. So when I say 3 people, one person was on the autism spectrum, one person had cerebral palsy, and another person was bipolar. So that's what that company gained out of that exercise. And there's so much that companies are losing out on if they're not moving into that space. And you mentioned, those leading employers, Vivek mentioned. So we are partnering right now with a multinational company who have engaged us to coach their neurodivergent employees who they have hired, because they're facing the challenge of sustenance. So here we proposed building an ecosystem where we do not only coach the employees, we coach the managers and the team members. And what has happened, we have seen that. So it's a metrics driven coaching program which is personalized for each person, and 100% of the employees have shown significant growth in just 2 quarters. So we have seen awards, we have seen promotions, and we have seen them being groomed for the next level. So this is all from our first-hand experience at Orchid with companies who are, taking this disability inclusion seriously and are invested in it. And there's so much of, gain that we are seeing out of it, that they are gaining.
This is such a heartening example to hear. And even the kind of results you've had, like they speak for themselves. What I really loved is the first is that rather than being this one-off thing, you have an end-to-end process, so it's comprehensive. You're hand-holding people throughout the way. The second element is how you've also targeted the systems in which our employees are embedded. So again, like to our earlier point, the onus isn't on the employee, the
Not at
onus
all.
is on everybody else to learn how to create a space that's psychologically safe,
Yes.
that understands, that is informed, and that can foster accessibility. Because uh, uh, to uh, to address a point of how in diverse companies approach, we like to focus on culture, because if you give people point one, point two, point three, point four, how to be accessible, people can follow 4 points. But if you nurture the ability to create a psychologically safe space, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the line, if some new, accommodation needs arise, those conversations can happen. We need to create that space so they can happen. Okay.
Yes.
So I think I would like to maybe continue on this theme. And what I wanted to ask you all was, are there, in terms of current trends or maybe cutting edge trends, any specific technology based approaches or any pioneering initiatives like the one Panchali outlined, that you have either implemented yourselves or have experience, you've heard of it being implemented to hire and retain people with disabilities at the workplace?
Thing that works out really well is the employee resource groups. So it's kind of a community. And for example, initially you will take just a pool of or cohort of people with disabilities, and once they are in, the managers, the colleagues, they get to know more about how they are accommodated, how they are able to contribute well, etc., etc., and they learn. And then then the news spreads, and that is how that community builds up. So I think the employee resource groups are very well, I will say, if they are implemented well in the organization for persons with disabilities, it will do wonders. There are also policies which can be designed for having proper accommodations for them. It can be around flexible working hours, it can be basis their productivity, basis their the medical needs or the personal needs. It is very important for them, because what we have seen when we have gone to the job fair for people with disabilities, especially for locomotive, they are looking at remote or work from home options more. So we have to also see that how we are able to have those roles created if we want to accommodate them more, or at least have those kind of sales support roles especially only for these people, so that they are very comfortable in applying there and adjusting themselves. So that's my take on this.
So while we were hiring as hiring consultants for employers, a lot of profiles came to us, and we met these people whose differences were very marked, and corporates would not hire them because the way they communicated was very different from the way we are communicating now. So and they wanted employment. So we started thinking, and Gitanjali, her problem solving mind, once there's a problem, she will get to the solution. So she identified this unique opportunity of data annotation in the AI space, which required competencies that align very well with the strengths of many of this group. And then we started training them in image annotation, because that does not require language. And once we trained them, then they started delivering on client projects. And today we see the trend that organizations are recognizing the business advantages of outsourcing image and video annotation work to, skilled and trained neurodivergent teams. First of all, the quality of work, and then zero attrition. So it increased with increased productivity, more revenue. So they are looking out. And currently, Orquate is partnering with NASCOM Foundation, we are offering a fully funded data annotation training program. It's called Neuro AI. It's free of cost. And after the training, we are giving 6 months of paid internship to 100 neurodivergent individuals across the country. So this is, and the first cohort of 50 has already started training this month. So 5th of August, we started it. And the second 50 will be starting their training in October. Currently, the screening process is going on. So I think, things are changing. The trend is there. And the program is so close to our hearts. Why? Because it's been designed by a neurodiverse team, and 75% of the trainers are neurodivergent themselves. So, and this is one space we've seen them actually thriving. So from annotators, they become QAs, quality assurance. Then they move into team leads, and we've seen them also as project managers. So yeah.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And Vivek, I'm mindful you were saying something, but just really quickly to summarize, I think all have shown inclusion in design on 3 levels. I think, Chhavi, you brought in this really interesting point about inclusion by policy. So what are the policies, processes, protocols that allow things to be more inclusive? And then Panchali, for you, there's this third layer of the very design of roles. How can we make them inclusive? So just connecting all those dots. Vivek, I'm mindful you were saying something.
I don't want to say, you started off with, is there something innovative, right? Sometimes we need to go back to basics.
Yeah.
This is one of those opportunities where we have to go back to basics. Chhavi touched on something very, very important. You can hire people with disabilities, but how do you ensure that they are included once they join a team where there is no sensitization that people may have, right? So hiring is not enough. It is important that the role that ERGs play in sensitization of organizations, so that as you hire, you also keep an environment which is inclusive, where people feel valued once they are a part of it, right? So that sensitization part is a very, very important piece. The other segment, which I think many organizations miss upon, and we learned this in our journey at some point of time, is the fact that it's very, very important for us to invest in lived experiences. Now, no one comes to an office thinking that today I'm going to do something against someone. Reality of it is, the first time we started doing some interviews, we realized when you had someone with a disability sitting in front of you, are you able to make eye contact? Something as simple as that, right? And we realized some people would reject a candidate not because the candidate had an issue, but because I was not comfortable in just interacting with the candidate, right? I didn't have the lived experience to work with the candidate. Now here we found that there is an opportunity for us to, through volunteering programs, through give opportunities, to give lived experiences to people. A lot of people would not even know what a person with visual disability can do. How can they read books? How can they participate? Because they don't have a lived experience working with someone with a disability. So they make those decisions based on their biases, their unconscious bias that these people cannot work. I think it's important to identify and address this gap of lived experiences. We do a lot of workshops with leaders. And when we do those workshops, what ends up happening is people start realizing, acha, this is how it works. This is how these accessible tools work with, right? So I think it's important not to just look at innovative solutions, right? Sometimes you just look at simple solutions. We realized we had to train everyone from the security guard, right? If you want to have someone come in for an interview, it's not that, from the gates to your room, everyone needs to understand inclusivity, right? Imagine there is someone who is rude to someone who's coming into the organization and struggling, right? So invest at all levels. We made a change in some of our interviews where we started doing the manager rounds first. We had trained the managers and we did the manager rounds first, so that others did not have to gauge someone based on a disability. So sometimes you have to reverse your entire process also. Lastly, partnerships. Don't try to solve everything. There are sometimes you work with organizations like Win-Win, right? There are so many other organizations which can work and get things done for you. So partner with the right organizations, it can make a huge difference. So those are some of the basic things that I also want to incorporate while we look at innovative solutions.
That's brilliant, really keeping it to the basics. And like the eye contact point, like I never thought about that, but that's such a subtle influencer. Or even if I'm coming to a venue for an interview and I have a negative experience with somebody at security, am I then being assessed at my best? And yeah, that's fantastic. I saw a lot of smiling and nodding as Vivek was speaking. I'm wondering if the other panelists have some thoughts on what Vivek shared.
I totally resonate with what Vivek said, that, hiring is just a very small, tiny piece of that puzzle. And it has to start way before hiring. That is, the awareness sensitization. And it has to go again a long way after the hiring. So yes, I resonate with that completely.
Yeah, and I think that unconscious bias, that is a very, 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 I mean, it plays a very important role in this, because the moment you approach any departments, hiring managers, and you say we want to hire a person with disability, or maybe with hearing impairment, and they will say, I will give calls. How will they take the call? And do I have that kind of patience to tell them that what I really need? How will I give instructions on the go? So these kind of hiccups are there, and they can go away in case you have these sensitization workshops and you make them aware that sometimes we have to let go of biases which we have held from many, many years ago. Now the times have changed. We may are not even aware of what kind of technologies are there which these people are using to make things easier for themselves, and they know much better than we know how they are able to use it. So in fact, when I have visited Vinvinaya Foundation, I mean last year, I realized how the visual impairment people were using their screen readers, how they were able to book Ola or Uber through their apps. I mean, it was very eye opening for me. I mean, for the first time, if you see all these things, if it can be to me as an HR person who has to know these things upfront. Imagine for those people who have never been in the hiring front and the as a face, right? They always rely on us mostly, but we have to guide them in a way that they are open uh, to such conversations, and they are open to even make their unconscious biases conscious, and to kind of reduce those biases going forward.
Yeah. And I think, Chavi, those kind of eye-opening moments really act as a perspective shift for people. And when that perspective shifts, and I think marrying that with curiosity really allows you to immerse yourself in the lived experience of another and make that shift. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I'm also mindful of time and I want to make sure we're leaving our panelists on time. So before we end for today, what I wanted to ask you was a very simple question. You can take a moment to think about it. But for all the lovely people in our audience today, if you had to give them any one takeaway that they should start doing immediately to make their immediate work teams, work environments more inclusive for people with disabilities, what do you think that one thing would be?
Rapid fire, 30 seconds.
I would say the first thing that they should do is start actively listening to these people, their experiences, their needs, their challenges. That is
Yeah, listening. Okay.
I would say that I would go with you, Jay, that
Okay.
immediately the thing that we can do, each one of us, look around us and the colleagues who are different and befriend them. So,
Befriend.
yeah, and when you befriend, you're not just supporting the person with disability or, the marginalized group, but you are actually enhancing yourself. So you improve as a human being, you become a better team member, you become a better leader. So start befriending.
Okay. I love that word, befriend. And Vivek?
I would want to start off with just thanking everyone on this call, because what this community needs is allies. right? Be an ally. This is something that touches each one of us, right? When you see something, do something, right? I think there is a need for many, many more vocal allies, right? We have to move away from, this is a good thing to do, from sympathy to actionable empathy, right? And there is a role that every single one of us have to play. I also want to thank everyone on this call today because many of them are allies. I'm sure some of these insights will help you have more meaningful conversations. Thank you for what you have done so far and what you're going to do after this to make lives better.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really quickly, we have 2 minutes. I can see two short questions in the chat. I'm going to quickly pose them to you. The first one is the word disability, is that a useful word for us to use? Is that terminology useful? Bit of a tricky one.
I don't see there's any problem with the word of the use of the word disability. Sometimes heroism can make it very, very tricky. I tell you
Mhm.
where, sometimes, and again, this is a controversial view, right? A lot of times in India, we talk about Divyang, right? Uh, when you look at movies start making people with disabilities look like such champions at times. What it does is, it sometimes makes it very difficult for a normal person with a disability to just not live up to those expectations that the world sees out of them. Every disability, sometimes glorification, over glorification can become a problem. And what happens is everyone is has to get that equal playing field, right? Disability is absolutely, but there should always be that respect as far as disability is concerned. There is a lot of literature available on disability etiquettes as to how should we address people with disabilities. It should always be a people first language, right? Be respectful, be mindful. I think that is very, very important. uh, Sometimes the usage of glorification can go against the cause. You are doing it with a good intent, but if that intent is not landing, you're creating problems.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's the intention it's going with, but then the impact it's having actually on people. That's a really well-reasoned perspective. Any other thoughts on that before we close for today?
I think I would say the same thing. Intent
Yeah.
is what is important. The terminology is secondary. So
Yeah.
the intention has to be right. So in certain countries, they refer to PWDs as people with determination. And that's a very nice thing that you think of. But then again, there would be people who would not like that maybe
Yeah.
because of the glorification. So
Yeah.
yes, the intention has to be genuine. That is
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think Vivek, what he said, there was a recent movie, Shrikant by Rajkumar Rao, who starred in that movie. But yes, it talked about a story that, even those people can do it. People with visual impairment can do something. So at least it all depends on how you take it, right? You can't change the mindset of people overnight. But yes, these conversations go a long way. And that is where we all have to start and be in this journey together.
Panchali, Vivek, Chhavi, thank you so much for being here. Atulya, thank you so much for your lovely work interpreting. To our participants for joining, thank you so much.